For the last 6 months or so, I've been on the search far and wide, hunting the internet, YouTube, Facebook, socials, um, looking for evidence of current day systemic racism. It's proven surprisingly difficult to find evidence of current day systemic racism. I was in the camp that it most certainly existed. I was taught it in schools. I've been in the lectures. I've read the books. It was a foregone conclusion. And as I start looking for it in modern day practice, it's proving to be rather elusive. So I got a clip here. The video title is called Indisputable Proof of Systemic Racism. So surely this video will give me the evidence I've been looking for. Let's give it a look.
Let me show you a quick example of what systemic and generational racism looks like in the United States. On this day in 1866, Texas passes a law restricting black people from testifying in court proceedings, denying them basic civic access. But come on, that was 1866. It's not like that's still happening now, is it? Is it? October 2022, Texas mail-in ballots rejected most often for voters of color, up to a 50% higher rejection rate than white voters, denying black and brown people basic civic access. White supremacy isn't just a terrorist wearing a hood burning a cross. It's much more sinister and covert than that. And that's why it's so much more dangerous.
All right, well, there it is. We saw the claim. Now, I think it's important to distinguish the difference between regular racism, which is very much alive and well in this country. You see it in pretty much every culture on this globe. That being different than systemic racism, needing an institution to keep it in place. So we'll refer to a Google definition just to make sure that we're being precise. A middle of the road definition of the difference between racism and systemic racism. According to Google, racism is prejudice or discrimination based on race, while systemic racism is a broader, deeper concept where these racist ideas become embedded in society's institutions like laws, policies, and systems, creating a pervasive inequality regardless of individual intent. Now, the video gives two examples. The first example, clearly systemic racism, without a doubt, objectively systemically racist, cannot be disputed. So to that, the title of the video was correct and accurate. The second example, not so much, as far as evidence of current day systemic racism. There is a long history of systemic racism in the United States of America, and really across the globe, but in the United States specifically. And the thing about systemic racism, when it's alive and active, people don't have to look that hard. You could point directly to it, a la Jim Crow, slavery, denial of poll tax, all these things where two people from opposite sides of the political spectrum could sit and look at these objectively speaking and clearly identify it as a systemic racism. Nowadays, if you have to really, 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 really look and do like intellectual gymnastics and all these things to try to prove systemic racism, you have to ask the question, is it really even still in existence? You've got the very first, you could say the biggest problem with his second claim about the 50% of non-white voters being denied mail-in ballots in Texas. The biggest problem is that they don't ask the race on the mail-in ballots in Texas. They don't ask it on the application for the mail-in ballots in Texas. The race is not listed to the government when they cast the mail-in ballots in Texas. So that's a big problem, because you're saying that these people were rejected on race merit, but yet the people doing the rejecting don't know what race these people are. So that's a huge problem. So you might ask a very good question: how did the study determine that there was a racial disparity? And it's a great question. So I asked that question. I looked into it. The Brennan Center for Justice performed the study, and they got the information through a public information request. And what they did was, according to, let's see, Kevin Morris of the Brennan Center for Justice, the demographic data about the voters used census tracts, surnames were used to estimate the probability that each voter is a member of a different racial group. So they used census and surnames to estimate the probability that each voter is a member of a different racial groups. So we don't even have hard data here. Like, we're estimating based on names what racial group these people belong to. I mean, you don't have to be a real critical thinker to see the problems that can develop from that methodology. And then to trot it out as some sort of hardened evidence is also problematic. The biggest reason that the ballots were rejected, Texas did pass a law in 2021 making it a little tougher to cast a vote, mail-in ballot. They required that you had to write your driver's license, personal identification number, or last four of the social on the application and ballot. The trick is that had to match what you used when you originally registered. And if that's 40 years ago, you got to remember what you registered 40 years ago as. Now, that is a problem. That's not, I think that's excessive. A lot of people probably don't remember that, but that's nothing to do with race. There's a whole ton of white people that will struggle with. I mean, that is not a racial discrimination situation. Like, you're telling people that you have to remember how you registered. That's equally applied to every race. So again, you run into the problem that you can't call it systemic racism if all races are affected equally. And that's the situation we have. And even on the website of Texas Voting, like, they tell people that are older population, a lot of these people that are older, that are mailing in ballots, it's recommended that you have a loved one or a trusted person come help you, walk you through the steps to get this vote done properly. They have instructions to do that. Now, is it racism that some people didn't follow instructions? I don't think so. No, I really don't. When you go further, you go into the statistical breakdown of what this claim is making here. So the rejection of applications or mail-in ballot combined. Asians were rejected 19%. Blacks were rejected 16.6%. Latinos were rejected 16.1%. You add up those three numbers and you come up to a total of 51.7%. So that's where we're getting the claim that 50% more non-white voters were rejected. Sounds great on surface level, right? But hold on. When you first account for the fact that they didn't even touch Middle Eastern or Native American population, which is a curious, it's curious that they left those out. I mean, there's a good chance that doesn't support their narrative, but there's no mention of Middle Eastern or Native American. So you got to look at that. But then when you look at whites were rejected at 12%, you would have to subtract that 12% from the 51%, and you have 39%. So that's the I mean, anyone that knows me knows I have like a grade school knowledge of mathematics. And I can look at what they're doing here at a grade school level of mathematics and easily see how the narrative is being manipulated. We're being emotionally manipulated by narratives like this. When so if you say 39% more non-white voters than white voters were disqualified, look at the facts. You're taking three races, lumping them together, and comparing them to one race, the white race, and saying that there's more non-white people that were disqualified than white people. Well, you're taking three races, you're leaving out the races that don't fit your narrative, you're taking the ones that do, and you're creating a systemic racism narrative. When you look at it individually, let's just say how many more black people were disqualified than white people. That number is a whopping 4.6%. That's well within a margin of error of any sort of study, especially when you're not even using hardened facts on what those demographics actually are. If you would come out with the video and say 4% more of black Americans were disqualified in Texas mail-in ballots than their white counterparts, that's not very extravagant. I mean, people are going to be like, oh yeah, so what? I mean, there's no big deal. You have to inflate everything, make this whole thing up, and then say it's 50%. Well, it's just not based on racism. It really isn't. When the narrative is made to be about systemic racism when it's not, there's actual harmful consequences in the community. Like, why isn't the conversation that, oh, older people are having trouble completing their mail-in ballots? Let's do some community outreach. Let's have volunteers. Let's go into the homes. Let's make sure they can figure this out and fill in their ballot properly. Or let's set up transportation to move them to and from the polling places. All things that are within our control. But when the narrative is just systemic racism, it disempowers people to make those moves. It's intellectually lazy, and it's not helpful. If your goal is a more equal society, you wouldn't want to use systemic racism for attaining that goal, because all that does is divide people from their power, divide people from each other, and divides people from real life steps that can be taken to shrink these disparities. Because in a perfect world, we have 0% of rejected ballots, right? Irregardless of race. That's all I got for this. Thanks.